So a very interesting thing happened this evening. Well, about a week ago, my girlfriend and I attended a Catholic mass at the church that I have a long history with when I was a child. Now I'm 59 years old, and that was a long time ago. So I've hardly been to church since, sporadically over my long life, but you know, I I was what they called a recovered Catholic, which I don't even know what that means, but I've long professed Jesus, but as the most self-realized man, Son of God, you know, I uh, I like rational, I like philosophy, the supernatural like that without proof. I stopped believing that Jesus was the Son of God a long time ago. But I'm not going to get into the atheistic and agnostic segments and phases of my life. Agnostic for most of my life. Then I would call myself spiritual, right? I disdained organized religion and just spiritual, like, where of course, there's a universal intelligence, a benevolence, even, but then I know no religion has claim to this thing. That was my position for the longest period. But I've been called back to Jesus in the last year or two in subtle ways, which I'm not gonna get into in this video. I'm just going to talk about the very interesting thing that happened this evening. A week ago, I go to OLG, Our Lady of Guadalupe, with my girlfriend. Mistakenly, it's the Spanish speaking church. And my church, this church is, the demographics have shifted. It's no longer Italians. It's now primarily Hispanics and Mexicans that attend this church. So it was a well attended mass, about 300 of the flock, the laity. And so, okay, well, we're here to hear Spanish. But I tell you, I heard that priest speak. I heard his words, though I didn't understand them, not linguistically. I understood them on a deeper level about what was being said and what was being professed and what was going on in that building, in that large cavernous room known as Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. At the end of the mass, this was a short mass. I spoke to the father and I told him I used to be an altar boy in that church, in the 70s, mid 70s, before they kicked me off the altar boys for drinking the sacristy wine, future alcoholic. But I didn't tell him that part. And he blessed me. I didn't ask, it was unsolicited, but he blessed me right there at the entrance of the church. And it felt wonderful. I felt delighted afterwards. A day later, things started shifting in me. And I didn't think about them too much, but I started, some things, I was doing things differently in this Jesus consciousness because I've been called back to Jesus. I feel it, I hear it, I think about it, I ask questions, but I couldn't reconcile that Jesus is God. Where's the proof? You know, where's the compelling thing? I was indifferent. I'm not indifferent. I was ambivalent, but I couldn't say he was God. I couldn't say he wasn't, but I certainly couldn't. I couldn't say he was. That was the main contention, the main impasse about returning to Christianity. Because even though I called myself a Christian or an unconventional Christian, the truth is I wasn't, because I didn't believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ and any other peripheral beliefs or sub beliefs that stem from that. But that was the primary one. That if you couldn't get past that belief, there's no going any further. So I've been talking to my girlfriend about this. She's on her own spiritual journey. Everyone is on their own journey, spiritual and otherwise. And she pushed me to go to confession today. And I was going to go, but was unsure about it because I knew that to receive communion, which is a primary um, ritual of the Catholic Church, you have to be cleansed. You have to have confessed to the priest in the rite of attrition. And the sacrament is it a sacrament? But this it's very important in the church where the priest steps in for God to hear for a person to become, reconciliatory towards their own sins and behaviors. And so I wasn't going to go because yeah, you got to do that to receive communion. And but I didn't want to receive communion because I'm not a real Christian yet. Things got to be sincere. There's no cheating here. Um, and for what? For what end? But I did go because things have been shifting. So I got off my lazy ass and I went to church for confession. Just two or three people were in the church, and my turn came quickly. I walked into that confessional. Now the church has changed over the years. I'm quite familiar with this church, as I said. I was baptized in this church in 1965. All right, and I've returned. Uh, but I love all churches. Anyway, aside from that, so I go into the confession and I tell the priest, and I recognize him, his father, Prince, wonderful man with an accent. I saw him about a year ago, and I said I hadn't been there for years, and he said he said that he hoped to see me more and more. Hmm. Well, I saw him today, and that's since then. Saw him today in that confessional, and I told him, Father, I hadn't been to confession in 30 or 40 years, or possibly more. I'm 59 now, and that I was being drawn back to Jesus, but I didn't believe that he was God, and I had a great trouble with this. And I want to believe, but it has to be sincere. And there can't be no contraventions here. It has to be a real, organic, and truthful belief. But aside from that, that troubled me. That I was very sorrowful, and sorry that I had been so sinful. What is sinful? Basically, just misdeeds, misthoughts. Okay, you can go into the seven deadly sins, and you can go to many others. But I said what I'm most guilty of in being sinful is being lazy, sloth, that deadly sin. Also pride, but pride in that insofar as that I'm pretty good with the first two-thirds of pride, where I know I should change and that I need to change, but then I don't, right? The last third. So I'm good with the first two-thirds, but the last third, I don't change. That's where the pride is still intact. And pride is the deadliest of all the seven deadly sins. But I just talked, those are the only two sins I mentioned. And he talked to me. I was in there about 5 minutes. He talked to me about the prodigal son, which of course I'm familiar with. There's a story of this son who went away and was very sinful and spent all his father's money. But when he finally came back repentant, his father welcomed him back with open arms. Though I was quite familiar with the story, it was good to hear it. I hadn't thought about that in a while, and especially in that state. That was the difference. And then he talked to me about a few other things about that God is always waiting for me and God always loves me. And things got to be voluntary. Things got to be truthful and sincere. And there's so much nuance. But he gave me my penance, which is penances prayers that you've got to do to reconcile. And they were to say 5 Hail Mary prayers, 5 Our Father prayers, otherwise known as the Lord's Prayer. And I was rusty on the latter. And say the act of contrition and the 51st Psalm. I was very grateful and sorrowful. I cried for a short period in sorrow that admitting that I was so sinful. And I was touched at the priest's words and the feeling I was in this state of of being cleansed, And so then I went outside immediately of the confessional, sat down in the pew, or kneeled down, and I started praying. Now, this church is called Our Lady of Guadalupe. The main, of course, Jesus is the center. The man crucified on the cross, the God supposedly, right? But his mother Mary is the primary feature of the church. Name of the church. She's up there in the top in various places in the church. So as I said, first I said the Our Fathers, and I had some trouble with it, but I said the five, and I kept rigid, with discipline, not a cheap weak kneel, but keeping your whole body straight from the knees up. And then I said the Hail Marys, uh, and when I did the Hail Marys, I looked at Mary, these paintings, this statue, which was near to me. I was in the left front of the church, and then there's this Christmas nativity diorama with Mary there in the manger scene, and I looked at them for the first street. The last two, I got up and I knelt at the altar, and I started. As I prayed these prayers, I felt I sensed more clarity where they weren't just words. Though I was saying that I was thinking about all the words as best I could, with that what their meanings were, rather than just saying things out of memory or rote, and not considering what they mean. But as I said them, they became clear, and then it was more and more. It became a conversation, even though I was saying the same words over and over. A conversation with God, right? And um, and I felt a greater kinship, a greater proximity, connection. And I got up after the eight prayers, and I knelt at the front altar on the left side, and I prayed towards Mary, um, and I moved several spots, looking at the main altar, the Mary statue on the left side, and then this diorama. And then I felt wonderful, and I didn't. I would do the act of contrition later on. I'll get to that, but and the 51st Psalm I didn't get to it yet. But I felt the contrition. I felt the sorrow and the regret and the sorrow, the shame, but the sorrow. But now I felt different. I was feeling cleansed, lighter. And so this is about a half hour or so before the 5:30 p.m. mass starts on a Saturday, which is a lot of people go to in lieu of the conventional Sunday morning mass. I think they call it vigil or something. A lot of people like it, but I don't know if I've ever been to one. I'm not sure. Um, my memory is terrible. But then I said, okay, let me read these. Actually, churches have all these things around, placed on their walls, right? Statues and pictures and plaques and all sorts of things that have all sorts of writings on them. But you don't really read them when you're in church because you don't have the time. You're not there to read stuff on the wall. You're there to participate in a mass or something. So you don't really get to read them, right? I always wanted to, but I don't get to. But so I said, okay, I'm going to read these things. So I started at that left side and started with the those statues I mentioned, right? I prayed to them again in the diorama nativity, and then it's Pope John Paul picture from I remember it was a pope in the 70s and 80s that my grandmother loved. She was quite a devout Catholic from Italy. And then I got to the Station of the Cross. Now, Station of the Cross is like these depictions of the sequence of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, uh, to the very end. And they have it in a number of areas throughout the church, well, on the walls that go in a circuit from the beginning to the end. So I started reading the first one, standing there, and I proceeded down the wall, reading, looking at the stained glass window, looking at them, reading anything there, and continuing with the Stations of the Cross. And I felt it. I felt it. I felt the power of Jesus, and and it was becoming more and more solemn. And by the time, and so I was reading all these things, and I was including all these donations from all these people, and I started reading less of that and more, and concentrated more on some of these words about this religious situation of Jesus. And then by the time I got to the fifth station, walking towards the back of the church, I said to myself, I should kneel. And then I said, wait, this is not where you kneel. You don't kneel in the walkway of it's a church, but you don't, I've never seen anybody kneel in a walkway, right? This is the side. They kneel as prescribed. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to kneel. People are going to look at me funny. I'm being weird. I'm being corny, you know? And I said, well, what does it matter? I said to myself, what people see and think. I said, I should kneel. I feel like kneeling. Kneeling is the right thing to do. What the communication I'm having here, which is largely, without thought, without words, that kind of connection. It's visceral, but beyond that, it's spiritual. So I knelt. I knelt, and all these thoughts. Now I'm praying. I'm kneeling, and with my back rigid, kneel from the knees up. And I got up and I proceeded. Station 6, Station 7, Station 8. I knelt. I started crying. I started crying in sorrow, and sorrow for myself, and sorrow for Jesus, this terrible execution that he went to willingly. And my solemnity increased. And I continued to read everything along those stained glass, these statues, more statues and depictions to the back of the church, continue the stations of the cross. Most of them have these little recesses and that's where I was kneeling, right? And so people can walk between me and this depiction on the wall, which is like each of them had these about three figures, Jesus and two others. And most of them, it was a cross, a crucifix in there. I got to station 10, now on the other side of the church. And, the whole time I was asking God, how can I believe? I was asking Jesus, how can I believe that you're God? Are you God? How can I believe that you're God? And at station 10, I heard a thought, a question. The question was, how can Jesus help me if he's not God? And I realized that he could not help me if he wasn't God. And I want Jesus' help. I need Jesus' help. And don't get me wrong, life is pretty good for me. Yeah, I'm going through a rough time in business, but that's been that way for years. And I'm more optimistic than ever, actually, because of the situation. So it's nothing, life is good. Nothing bad is going on. Good things are good. Um, so there's no desperation here. There's no negativity. There's just this being called back to Jesus. And I asked this question, how can Jesus help me if he's not God? And then I said it. I felt it. I said, you are God. You are God. Jesus is God. So, I introduced the idea on Facebook, and people say, oh, Jesus, is Jesus God? And people give these scriptures and say all these things that are sophistries and basically useless. It has to be a personal thing. No one can tell you to believe in this or that. And people believe in all sorts of things. All beliefs are constructed, but here's a religious belief, a major tenet. And I've been drawn, I've been called, but I wrestled with this. All these and the primary reason why I stopped believing God is that all these religions got God, who's got the right one, right? Everyone claims it, but of course, Christianity is the only one with the supernatural God, right? The one the one guy who dies and comes back and ascends, miracles, Virgin Mother, and all that. But it came to me finally. that Jesus is God, because in that way he can help me. That final third of that pride, that sloth, and I'm so committed to personal development, but is this all about personal development? Well, that's the biggest thing in my life, but no, this is my journey. This is what this is. This is my journey. Everyone's on their own journey. This is where I am right now. It was wonderful. And oh yeah, this now I'm going to get to perhaps the best thing, or one of the best things, the second best thing. After I admitted that Jesus was and is God, and this is totally true, I felt sorrow and relief and wonderful. 3 seconds later, bells started ringing. The bells of the church started ringing. Bing, 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 for like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes. And later on, I found out that that's like, I must have been like, oh, no, I don't know if I found out, but I realized later on, like when I spoke to my girlfriend about it over dinner, that must have been the call for the mass that was coming, the 5:30 mass. This must have been about 5:20. Like maybe mass is gonna start in 10 minutes or 5 minutes, 5:25. That's what it was. But it was totally perfectly timed, like a movie for me. I admitted that Jesus is God. I was saved. I was converted. And the bells began ringing in the church. It was it was one of the greatest moments of my life. And I proceeded to st station, that was station 11, 12, 13, and 14. The final one, I realized that here's Jesus on the cross getting pulled down, or getting pulled down from the cross. Yeah. That what happened is, for me, is that, they're saying everyone has their cross to bear. It's true. But for me, I had put down my cross some time ago. I wasn't being crucified. I wasn't being crucified. That's the wrong expression. I wasn't going through the rough. I wasn't growing. I'd become indolent, stagnated. Even though I embrace personal development, my personal development has is you know is diminished, at least in the spiritual side, right? When I was a life coach, we used to coach people in these different areas of life. Like, you can divide up six areas. There's 8 or 10 or even more. There's however you want to do it. There's different ways to make this spectrum. But one of them is always spiritual, right? How's your spiritual growth? How's your spiritual development? And mine, it's been crap, stagnated. I mean, stagnated, awful, and so I've become thirsty and hungry, and I just learned to live with it, and learn to just to be lazy and do nothing. But it still has its toll. But at station 12, I said, I don't know, 12, 14, I said, I've got to pick up my cross again. I put my cross down some time ago. I've got to pick it up again. Pick it up. I realized that. Jesus showed me that I have to pick up my own cross. And then I continued to the around. That was at the right side of the church, and now there's a right side altar, which has a wonderful depiction of Mary and Joseph, the father, and their son Jesus. They're holding a nice little family statue, and then I kneeled and prayed there, and then one more to the left, before there's the main altar, was a wonderful painting, like a 3D painting of Jesus. And I went and knelt and pray and knelt at that, and that said, Jesus. It said in the back that you can trust Jesus, and that's the message that I've been wanting and needing, is that I can trust Jesus. I can trust that Jesus is the Son of God and is God. It's a relief to speak the truth. You know, do I say that unequivocally with certain knowledge? No, of course not. I'm talking about my journey. I'm not the arbiter of the truth. I'm only the seeker of it, the searcher of it. And then I went into there's an ancillary altar to the side, and wonderful statues in there. Jesus in the middle of there, like a dozen statues in there. It was great, you know. And then the mass. I heard the mass begin, and I came out and I sat in the first row. I have not sat in the first row of a church in a very, very long time. You got to be a real Christian to sit in the first row. And I did. And I then I and Father Prince did the prayer, and it was so wonderful that this man who cleansed me of my sins, is saying the mass. And the first things he said was it seemed like he was speaking to me. Perhaps he was, perhaps it just sounded that way because the things that he was saying about coming back, he was talking about coming back, which that's me. I've come back after all these years, 50 years. I'm an old guy now, 59. And then he spoke about the John the Baptist, and which gave me some other ideas. But it was wonderful. It was wonderful. But there's the thing. The father, when he asked me in confession about it, you know, if I had taken the communion, I said, yeah, over the years, like about a handful of times, perhaps a half a dozen times, sporadically, you know, in some situation, some context, like a funeral, I took it, I knew that wasn't exactly the right thing to do, but I did it anyway, um, didn't feel, didn't like it about it, regretted it because I know I'm not supposed to, I'm not reconciled. But after all this time, after being anti-religious, really, I'm not getting into that in this video, but being all these ways I was philosophically, spiritually, religiously, developmentally, and now I'm a Christian again. I'm a Christian again, and I was in that pew, and now we got to the end of the mass where they do the liturgy of the Eucharist, which means the communion. And I went out there smiling, and Father Prince's everybody the way they used to be the old school. The priest would hold up this wafer, this circle of right, and then you put it place it on your tongue, and you'd walk over, you walk off. And they got rid of that years ago. Now they place it in the hand. I know that, but I was the second one in line on the side towards me, which is Father Prince. I kept my tongue out. I feel like it's more reverential to have the wafer placed on the tongue and not to handle it. And it felt wonderful, felt delighted. I was cleansed, and then I received communion, and it was wonderful. And then afterwards, I spoke to. So it was just an incredible thing. So for now, here you go. Let me give you guys something. This is it for me, man. This is oh, it's not even working. Well, um, oh, here it is. Isn't this wonderful? Uh, I'm back. I'm back, Christianity. You didn't leave me. I left you, but I'm back. And it's just so wonderful. And one thing I want to say, well, I want to say a lot of things, but I I spoke to some people afterwards. My girlfriend joined me after mass started. That was wonderful. And then we spoke to some people, Basil, and these people were there, married in that church 50 years ago, the guy 67 years ago. But then I also saw Father Martin, the Hispanic priest who is in residence there and who blessed me and who started this thing. When he blessed me and changed me. And I went up to him and I told him that. And that we had went to the Spanish speaking mass and what happened, and he blessed me again, and it felt wonderful. And then I went to the sacristy, which is this very same sacristy where I was an altar boy, the side where they kept the wine, and I got caught drinking the sacristy wine and got kicked off, where I was an altar boy 50 years ago for like what 3-4 years. And I saw Father Prince, and I asked him to bless this this crucifix for me. I got this off Amazon, but he blessed it. I kneeled and I kneeled before him and I held it up and I cried and he blessed it for me. So now it's a source of strength for me. And that's what happened to me today. Today I converted and I didn't think it was going to happen today. I didn't, it just happened organically as a wonderful sequence of events that I had something to do with, but in other areas I didn't. A part of the priest, part of the two priests, the part of my girlfriend, and the part of Jesus and God, the Holy Spirit. It's there are things that you do and there are things that get done to you. Today is a wonderful day, and it's still not over. Thank you for listening.